guys, thanks for visiting my channel. Today we're going to be canning up herb potatoes. So good and so great to have on your shelf. As a matter of fact, they make great mashed potatoes, and who doesn't love mashed potatoes, right? So we are going to be using a recipe out of the all-new Ball book of canning. If you've watched many of my canning videos, you know I love this book. Ball has a lot of great recipes for canning vegetables in here. They give you a lot of great ideas as far as seasoning goes. So that's where I got the idea and the recipe. Our instructions state that we can can them raw. I know the National Center for Home Food Preservation says that you should heat them first, but Ball, I do trust Ball, and they say that you can do this raw, so we are going to be canning ours raw. Their instructions are just to peel and rinse them, and then we're going to add some really delicious dried herbs to them, and then we're going to be cooking them or adding broth to our jars. A word on your broth. I know someone's going to ask me, can you can something that's already been canned? And the answer to that is yes. When I use my home canned stock for a recipe that I'm going to can, I just make sure the jar that I'm selecting is the most current jar on my shelf. So that answers that question. And then I have had someone ask me about peeling potatoes, which is part of Ball's instruction, and it's also the instruction given on the National Center for Home Food Preservation. I know you're gonna see people out there who can with the skins on, but their instructions, people who have tested canning potatoes, state that you should. The reason is botulism can live in our soil, and potatoes, carrots, beets, those kinds of things are a root vegetable, so they actually grow in the soil, so they're at a higher risk of botulism. So we want to remove the skin to remove the risk. So if you want to be an adventurous canner and you prefer to leave your skins on, that's entirely up to you. But we're going to follow safe canning guidelines, and we are going to peel our potatoes. A word on potatoes, they recommend, both the National Center for Home Food Preservation and Ball recommends using white potatoes. Apparently those can the best. Now I have seen other websites where people are canning other kinds of potatoes. I'm not going to say that's wrong, but that's not what is recommended by Ball and the National Center for Home Food Preservation. So if you want to can other sorts of potatoes, if you want to do that, you can certainly give it a try. But what's recommended for canning and has been proven to can well are white potatoes. And they come in different sizes. They're usually round. And another recommendation for this recipe and for canning anytime you can potatoes is if they're 2 inches in diameter or less, you can leave them whole. You can cut them in half. If it's a bigger guy like this, I'm going to quarter him. So you want your potatoes to be roughly the same size as much as possible when you're canning them. This recipe calls for 2.5 pounds, but I have a 5-pound bag, so I'm going to be doing my whole 5-pound bag. And that should give us 4 quarts or 8 pints. Their recipe states that 2.5 pounds will give you 2 quart jars or 4 pints. So I'm going to do my whole 5-pound bag instead of just 2.5 pounds. So I should get 4 quarts out of this recipe. So I'm going to get busy peeling and rinsing my potatoes, and then I will bring you back and we'll add some delicious herbs and our hot broth. Okay guys, we're back. Here we go. I kept my potatoes in cold water while I was peeling them to keep them from oxidizing, and then I just drained them quickly before I turned my camera back on. My jars are squeaky clean and they are hot. Modern canning guidelines state that if you're canning for longer than 10 minutes, you do not have to pre-sterilize your jars or lids. So they're just nice and clean. My jars are hot. My lids are setting to the side. My stock is hot. You want to make sure you're using hot broth or stock. And my canner has hot water in it that's heating. So we're ready to season our potatoes. Now, your seasonings are totally adjustable. You can do just about anything you want as far as adding flavor with dried herbs. They recommended for their herb potatoes, they wanted a teaspoon of rosemary, a teaspoon of thyme, a teaspoon of black pepper, and 2 teaspoons of salt, but I'm doubling the recipe, so I'm doubling that. Plus, I'm going to add some dried parsley to mine as well. I love parsley with potatoes, so I'm going to add some dried parsley. Another thought I had when I was preparing for this, another combo of herbs that would be really great is herbs de Provence. I think that would be delicious with the potatoes. But we're going to go with their recommendations today with the addition of the parsley. And their instructions say to just add your seasonings, your dry seasonings, to the potatoes in a big large bowl. So we're going to need 4 teaspoons of salt, and I always use canning salt whenever I'm canning, even though the recipe doesn't specify. And then I'm going to use 2 teaspoons of dried parsley, and this is for 5 pounds of potatoes. 2 teaspoons of dried rosemary, 2 teaspoons of dried thyme, and then I have 2 teaspoons or so of freshly ground black pepper. But again, that's all adjustable. You can do whatever you want there. So we're just going to give this a stir. Trying to get all the potatoes evenly coated. If I didn't state before, we are pressure canning because vegetables are a low acid food and must be pressure canned. You cannot water bath can this recipe. You cannot water bath can any vegetable. All right, that's pretty good. So now we need a jar. And I think I did state before, this should give us 4 quarts or 8 pints. And I would use wide mouth. I think it would be hard to use the regular mouth jars to get your potatoes in there unless you cut them up small. Ball did also state that you may not be able to add much broth once you fill your jar. And we are going to fill our jars to 1-inch headspace. Looks pretty with just the dried herbs and potatoes. To monkey with them a little bit, get them adjusted just right. And then we're to fill our jars to 1-inch headspace with our hot broth. And 1-inch headspace, for any of you who are new, a good way to tell 1-inch headspace is the very bottom, the very bottom of the threads on your jar. That's about 1 inch. Okay, now we are going to debubble like we always do. We want to release any air bubbles that are trapped in our jar. So just poke around your jar a little bit and double check your headspace, see if any of that changed. It looks like I'm pretty good. So I'm going to use a paper towel dipped in white vinegar. And I'm going to wipe the rim of my jar. I'm going to center my lid. fingertip tight. You want to put your ring on fingertip tight. And then we're going to lift it into our canner. These look delicious, don't they? All right, I'm going to fill my other 2 jars and then we'll get this party started. Okay, their recipe was spot on. I got 4 quarts out of my 5 pounds of potatoes. Now, they didn't give any reference for how much broth or stock you need. I ended up using 2 quarts of stock, so I would count on about that. It's going to vary depending on how many potatoes you actually get in your jar, but I did use 2 quarts of stock just for reference. So we're going to go ahead and put our lid on our canner. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to take my vinegar, a couple tablespoons of vinegar, and put it in my canner. That just helps to keep your jars clean during the canning process so that any minerals that are in your water don't collect on the outside of your jars. And we're going to put on our lid and tighten our thumb screws. And then we are going to crank up our heat to high. And then we're going to allow the steam to vent for 10 minutes, and I'll bring you in close and show you that once that starts happening, and then we're gonna put on our weight. So I will bring you back in a few. Okay guys, I wanted to bring you in close and show you what I mean about venting. You should see a steady stream of steam coming out of your vent for 10 minutes. And then once your 10 minutes are up, then we can put our weight on. See it? All right, I'll bring you back. Okay guys, we've been venting for 10 minutes. Now it's time to add our weight. I'm at less than 1,000 feet for altitude, so I'm going to be canning at 10 pounds of pressure. You need to make sure you know your altitude to know what adjustments you need to make. So I'm going to go ahead and put my weight on. And once it starts rocking and rolling, we're ready to start timing, and our processing time is going to be 40 minutes. Hey guys, showtime. So we need to set our timer for 40 minutes. And then you also want to adjust your heat. You do not want your weight to rock the whole time. So you want to adjust your heat so that it rocks 1 to 3 times a minute. For me, that's about a medium heat, but that is too much. So we want to bring it down a little bit. I've got my heat adjusted, and we're going to listen for our rocking and rolling 1 to 3 times a minute for the next 40 minutes. Okay guys, our processing time of 40 minutes is up, so I'm going to turn off my heat. We're going to let our canner turn to 0 pressure naturally. We're not going to do anything with it to speed up the process, just let it return to 0. Once you are at 0, you can remove your weight. Then you're going to wait 5 minutes, and then we can open the canner. Once we open the canner, we're going to let our jars sit inside the canner for 10 minutes to cool down a little bit before we take them out. So I'll bring you back. Okay guys, we are ready to take our potatoes out of our canner. Once my canner returned to 0 pressure, I removed the weight, waited 5 minutes, and then removed my lid, and my jars have been sitting in my canner cooling for about 10 minutes. So now we're ready to take them out. They smell delicious. Give you a sneak peek of how good they look. Does this look great? This would be a great way, since we have the holidays coming up, Thanksgiving will be here before we know it. If you are looking for a way to prep ahead, this is a great way to have potatoes ready for mashing. All you have to do is reheat them and then add your milk and your butter and whatever you add to make your mashed potatoes, and you'll have delicious herb mashed potatoes ready to go. It's a great thing to have on your shelf to make a meal in a hurry if need be. So I hope you'll give this a try. I appreciate you coming along with me today. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the comment section. I did want to mention, and I do fail to mention this often in my canning sessions, but you should know that your jars need to sit for at least 12 hours undisturbed. And then you need to remove the rings, wash your jars, and store them in a cool, dry place. So anyway, give it a try, you guys. It's really great, easy to do, and wonderful to have on your shelf. If you're not a subscriber, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of the fun, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.